In this video, we take a look at the events that took place in Kershaw, South Carolina. On December 26, 2011, 30-year-old Hope Melton called her grandmother and told her that she was driving down a rural road and that someone was following her. Hope was scared and did not know what to do. She didn't have time to give her grandmother any details because the call was cut off. To solve this case, the police used CCTV footage, thanks to which they were able to see the suspect. Another feature of this case was the poor performance of one of the authorities, which ultimately affected the outcome of the case. Beverly Hope Roscoe Melton was born December 4, 1981, in Cheraw, South Carolina, a daughter of William Roger and Elizabeth Ray Hodge Roscoe. She was an honor graduate of Chesterfield High School class of 2000, where she was a member of the Beta Club, Vocational Honor Society, Health Occupational Class, and Chorus. Hope was manager of T&T Country Store in McBee, South Carolina. She attended Lancaster Church of God, where she taught children's church. Hope had been married to Gary Lee Melton for just over a year, and they were really happy and wanted to have children, but Christmas 2011 was the last Christmas they spent together. On December 26, 2011, Hope planned to visit her grandmother, who lived approximately 30 miles from Hope's home. She was supposed to arrive for lunch, but instead, her grandmother received a call on her cell phone. It was Hope calling. In a worried voice, she informed her grandmother that someone was following her. She asked for help. The call was cut off, and then Hope's mother and her grandmother got in the car and drove to look for Hope. 5 miles away on a long stretch of country road, they spotted Hope's car parked on the side of the road. But Hope herself was nowhere to be found. Her grandmother immediately called 911. The call was transferred to the county sheriff's office. When the sheriff's office received the call, it was transferred to police officers as a missing person call. It is very important, as soon as a missing person report is received, to start acting quickly. So one of the sheriff's deputies immediately went to the scene. He took a look at Hope's car. There was no damage to it. It was in good working order. So the version of a traffic accident was immediately ruled out. Hope's purse was in the car, but her wallet was missing. A forensic team searched the car, but found no clues as to Hope's whereabouts. Volunteers and police began combing the neighborhood for any clues. Hope's shocked and distraught husband, Gary, arrived on the scene. He informed the police that Hope had planned to stop at a gas station on her way to visit her grandmother. That was the only lead the detectives had at the time. The distance from Hope's house to her grandmother's house was approximately 30 miles. There were 4 gas stations along that route, and the detectives decided to check each one in order. The first gas station visited by the detective investigating Hope Melton's disappearance had security cameras. The detective began looking through the footage, hoping to see Hope on it. According to her husband, she left the house around 11:45 a.m. The detective asked the manager to show him the footage from an hour before Hope had called her family in a panic. At 12:19 p.m., a male customer walked into the store and everything looked normal. The detective continued watching the video. 3 minutes later, a woman appeared in the frame. Hope is blonde, about 5 feet and 5 inches tall, and weighs about 140 pounds. She was wearing a pink shirt and blue jeans. The detective immediately realized that the woman in the footage was taller than Hope, and it wasn't her. They scrolled through the tape until 12:45, but Hope never showed up. That meant she had probably filled up her car at some other gas station. Hope's family was in a state of shock. They searched for plausible explanations for her disappearance. There was a faint hope that she had simply gotten stuck in the mud and left the car. Perhaps someone had picked her up and taken her somewhere for help. They hoped Hope was okay and would be home soon. Meanwhile, the detective investigating her disappearance visited a second gas station that was only 10 miles from where Hope's abandoned car had been found. There were also surveillance cameras there that could help solve the case. Upon arriving at the gas station, the detective first spoke to the manager and told him that they were looking for a missing woman. When the detective described Hope's appearance and said what kind of car she was driving, the manager recalled possibly seeing Hope around 12 p.m. A surveillance camera that had been installed outside left no doubt that Hope Melton had been at this gas station before she disappeared. She had refueled her vehicle, and it appeared that nothing was bothering her at that moment. Footage from another camera showed a man holding the door for Hope, and she headed inside. Hope paid for her gas and exited the store. She looked happy and was in a good mood. It looked like she was really looking forward to spending the rest of the day with her grandmother. When the detective watched the video again, it was not Hope who caught his attention, but the man who held the door open for her to come inside. Surveillance cameras recorded that a man in a white cap followed her into the store. He turned to look at Hope. Hope paid for her gas and left, and the detective watched the man in the cap. The man paid at the counter and left the store. Unfortunately, the footage did not show anything to help identify the man. The detective turned to the surveillance footage again, hoping he could identify this man's car. One of the tapes showed Hope walking toward the store to pay for gas. At that moment, a dark minivan pulled up, from which a man wearing a white cap got out. But unfortunately, no license plate was visible on his car. He switched to another outdoor camera to see Hope driving away from the gas station. She walked back to her car. As she was about to pull away, a gray car pulled up. A man got out of it and turned to watch Hope's car pull away. But neither this driver nor the man in the white cap followed Hope out of the gas station. The detective watched the segment over and over again, trying to catch every detail he could. He was sure that there were further clues hidden in the gas station footage, and he just had to find them. And he was not mistaken. He switches to the first camera to the moment when Hope is walking back to her car. Another car comes into frame. It's an orange Chevy. The Chevy crosses the parking lot and turns back to the exit, and as Hope pulls away, the detective notices something important. The orange car follows her. The detective assumes that he noticed the car following Hope in the lead-up to her disappearance. Having obtained evidence that Hope had been followed from the gas station, the police had to figure out what happened next. Meanwhile, the search party found frightening evidence. 6 miles from Hope's abandoned car, they found a pink bracelet and a blood-spattered blanket. The bracelet was identified by Hope's husband. He had given her the bracelet as a Christmas present. All of this raised serious concerns for Hope's well-being. After the detective watched the gas station surveillance footage that showed the orange Chevy following Hope's car, he had to make sure it wasn't just a coincidence. On her way to her grandmother's house, Hope had to drive past an office building that had numerous surveillance cameras. The detective drove there, but the building was still closed for Christmas. It took some time to find an office manager who had keys and understood the CCTV system. There were many surveillance cameras on the building for the parking lot and the road Hope could use to get to her grandmother's house. The detective's main goal was to see if the orange Chevy was following Hope or if it turned somewhere else. Since the offices were closed for Christmas, the cameras were set to record only when they sensed movement. The detective began looking at the footage shot just after 12 p.m. The detective saw Hope's vehicle appear in the frame at 12:06 p.m. 2 seconds later, an orange car that had previously been seen by the gas station appeared in the frame. The footage shows the orange Chevy traveling just a few yards behind Hope's car. Both vehicles are heading north toward the road through the woods where Hope's car was found. The quality of the footage did not allow the license plate numbers to be seen, but it is a recognizable vehicle, and police have put out an APB. It took about an hour or two before this orange vehicle was stopped by police on a street in Jefferson, South Carolina. The driver was 23-year-old local resident Nicholas Miller. There was no one else in the car besides him. He was very nervous when the police pulled him over. Perhaps he had something to hide, and so he was brought to the police station where a detective questioned him. Miller answered all questions evasively. The detective asked Miller to tell how he had spent the day, what he had been doing, and where he had been. Miller replied that he had spent the morning shopping at a Walmart store 30 miles away. He then drove back to Jefferson. Police requested a search warrant for Miller's car, and the detective investigating Hope Melton's disappearance went to Walmart, where Miller said he shopped. Police had to check his story. The store has numerous cameras recording everything that happens on the sales floor. Law enforcement officials were very happy that they were able to get video surveillance data from Walmart because it helped verify Nicholas Miller's story. He was driving an orange Chevy, and at about 10 a.m., his car pulled into the parking lot. When the driver got out, the detective saw that it was indeed Miller. So far, his story has been confirmed. He just walks into Walmart like a normal day, like hundreds of other shoppers, and nothing out of the ordinary seems to be going on. It seemed like he was just going about his normal business. He didn't take a shopping cart or shopping basket. But as the tape played, the detective realized that Miller was no ordinary shopper. He seemed to be just hanging around the store, not interested in the merchandise being sold there. Perhaps he was in the store for an entirely different purpose. At one point, the detective noticed that Miller was not moving erratically through the store, but was following a woman, a blonde woman, who was not paying attention to him, but was minding her own business. Reviewing the footage further, the detective was convinced that his assumption was correct. Wherever the woman went, Miller followed her. But a few moments later, she reappears in the footage again, and this time with a man. At this point, it would be safe to assume that Miller realized that this was an unrealistic target for him. A few minutes later, the couple leaves the store. Investigators speculated that the woman may have been lucky to escape. After a few more minutes, cameras captured Miller leaving the store. As he exits Walmart, it appears that he is frustrated because a potential target has slipped from his grasp. We can only assume at this point that he is heading back to Jefferson, where he will eventually meet Hope at a gas station. Hope's family had hoped for her safe return home, but when police obtained a search warrant for Miller's car, it was clear that something terrible had happened to Hope. While examining the car, forensic investigators saw blood spatter on the passenger side fender and on the driver's side bumper. They also found Hope's wallet in Miller's car. Now that the authorities had new evidence, the decision was made to question Miller again. It is important to note here that the interrogation was conducted by Chesterfield County Sheriff Sam Parker. Remember that name? It's important. During the interrogation, Miller began to deny his involvement in Hope Melton's disappearance, but when informed of the evidence found, Miller finally admits his guilt and agrees to take the police to Hope's body. Miller led detectives to a remote turkey farm 14 miles from where Hope's car was found. She was lying on the ground, on her back, face up, with no clothes on. It was a truly horrific scene. Miller was unable to give any explanation that could explain why he did it. Hope's family was informed of the discovery of her body. What had happened to her had forever changed the lives of those who knew and loved Hope Melton. Now police could finally piece together the events that led to Hope's death. Investigators learned that Miller had recently broken up with his girlfriend. They believe this may have been the cause of his nervous breakdown, but we'll never know for sure. At the gas station, Miller saw Hope filling up her car. It was at that fateful moment that he decided to pursue her. She had had a wonderful Christmas with her family and was looking forward to a wonderful day with her grandmother. She had no idea someone was following her. As soon as they reached a backwoods road, Hope realized she was in danger and called her grandmother. Miller admitted that he had forced Hope off the road. He pulled her out of her car and forced her into his car. He then drove her into the woods, ripped off her clothes, and of course you realize what he did after that. Miller tried to cover his tracks. He took Hope to a turkey farm where he beat her to death with a baseball bat and dumped the body. She stopped for gas, and a chance encounter with the monster ended horribly for Hope. It's beyond human comprehension. Nicholas Miller has been charged with multiple counts. In the run-up to the trial, his ex-girlfriend provided police with horrifying evidence. In photos she took, Miller chased her in his orange Chevy just hours before he kidnapped Hope Melton. Now we need to get better acquainted with Chesterfield County Sheriff Sam Parker. As I said, it's very important in this case. Parker was fired from the police force, and I'll explain why that happened. Officials say Parker gave special treatment to inmates, took property intended for the sheriff's office and used it for himself, and gave uniforms, badges, and weapons to civilians. Parker let 2 inmates sleep and live outside the jail in exchange for doing work on his property. While in the armory, where the inmates were allowed to sleep, they had access to the internet, phones, and had unlimited, unsupervised visitors, all with the former sheriff's knowledge. Prosecutors also said Parker gave inmates at the jail special treatment that included alcohol and unsupervised visits with women. They were allowed to go shopping and dine out in restaurants. In exchange, the inmates allegedly performed work on the then sheriff's house and personal property. As a result, the former sheriff went on trial. During Parker's trial, Mike Lee, who is serving a 15-year sentence for arson, testified against the former sheriff. Lee testified while in the Chesterfield County Jail, he was able to furnish his cell with flat-screen TVs, a fridge, and a new mattress. Lee purchased the items with his own money sent from family. Lee told jurors that he would eat lunch with deputies and he was allowed to purchase and wear regular clothes instead of his jail outfit. Lee said he worked at one of the county's impound lots where he had access to internet, phones, and a Facebook account. Eventually, Lee moved out of the jail into the sheriff's armory where he had sex with a female visitor and hosted his birthday party where guests ate filet mignon and drank alcohol. A party thrown by an inmate at the sheriff's office is out of this world, isn't it? Share what you think about it in the comments. During his time in Chesterfield, Lee said he was able to take a private jet from Cheraw to Mount Pleasant to see his wife and child. Lee also testified he was driven to Florence, South Carolina, along with another inmate by a deputy in a marked sheriff's car to meet a female friend for a lunch date. Lee explained how he became very close with Parker by working at his home, going to church with Parker, and giving gifts to Parker's daughter. In 2014, Parker was found guilty on 5 counts of misconduct in office, 2 counts of giving contraband to inmates, and 1 count of embezzlement, and was sentenced to 2 years in prison with the possibility of parole. As the judge prepared to hand down Parker's sentencing, the former sheriff became emotional, apologizing to the people of Chesterfield County, family, and friends. After the verdict, Parker apologized to his family for embarrassing them and to his fellow law enforcement officers. As I mentioned earlier, it was Sheriff Sam Parker who interrogated Miller when Miller confessed to the crime and led the police to Hope Melton's body. Miller was facing the death penalty, but because of the sheriff's actions, prosecutors were unable to seek the death penalty. The fact is that during the interrogation, the sheriff promised Miller that if he confessed to the crime and told what happened to Hope Melton, he would not face the death penalty. The sheriff had no authority to make such a promise to a suspect. Miller believed the sheriff and confessed to the crime. In doing so, Sheriff Parker compromised the case. In a release, Solicitor Dan Johnson said former Chesterfield County Sheriff Sam Parker severely jeopardized the case. Johnson said Sheriff Parker got a confession from Miller under the illegal promise he wouldn't seek the death penalty. As a result of Sam Parker's gross misconduct in coercing Nicholas Miller's confession with a promise of leniency, all statements made in reliance on that promise would be properly suppressed at a trial in this matter, Johnson said in the release. In March 2015, 26-year-old Nicholas Miller pleaded guilty to all charges. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Hope Melton's family members were outraged and angry at the former sheriff, who had been convicted of corruption the year before and put the case in serious jeopardy. Hope's mother, Elizabeth, said they were somewhat disappointed and that they had hoped for the death penalty for Miller. The family said it's still waiting for an apology from Parker. Meanwhile, they'll keep fighting for justice and keep fighting to keep Hope Melton's memory alive.